My world shattered with 6 sterile words. "Your position is being eliminated, Mr. Pritchard." My name is Alexander Pritchard, and at 57 years old, I thought I was indispensable. 19 years I'd poured into Britannia Forge, a company that, under my meticulous eye, had produced the finest industrial components across Staffordshire. I was their senior financial controller, a guardian of the ledger, a man who believed in the unwavering truth of numbers. But that truth, it seemed, was inconvenient for some. Ophelia Reese, a woman whose elegance was as sharp as her ambition, didn't even bother to meet my gaze. Her eyes remained fixed on her tablet, a digital barrier between us. Across from me, Barnaby Croft, a man whose perpetually slicked-back hair seemed to mirror his equally slick personality, slid a cardboard box across the polished oak table. "We'll need your key card and parking pass. Alexander, security will escort you to collect your personal items." I simply nodded. There was no argument left in me, no plea for mercy, only a hollow ache where loyalty used to reside. Ophelia's perfectly manicured fingers drummed an impatient rhythm on the glass tabletop. "Is there anything you'd like to say, Alexander?" Her tone was laced with a chilling expectation, a hope, perhaps, for tears or an outburst that would somehow validate their ruthless efficiency. "No, thank you for the opportunity," I managed, the words tasting like ash. I rose, straightened my tie, and tucked my worn leather briefcase under my arm. The same briefcase my late wife, Amber, had given me 15 years ago, before cancer stole her, before I'd buried myself in spreadsheets and quarterly reports to escape the suffocating silence of our empty home in Chesterfield. Barnaby's emphasis on retirement package felt deliberate, a cruel jab. We both knew I was 3 years shy of full benefits. As I walked out, the security guard, a young lad named Gareth, looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Sorry about this, Mr. Pritchard," he whispered as I carefully wrapped Amber's photograph in tissue paper within the confines of my office. "Not your doing, Gareth," I replied, placing my key card on the desk. But the leather briefcase stayed clutched in my hand. Inside, a small USB drive held 3 years of meticulous documentation, every irregular vendor payment, every suspicious wire transfer, every suddenly canceled audit. Ophelia and Barnaby believed they were merely cleaning house, ridding themselves of the old-school accountant who dared to question the deluge of new consulting fees flooding departmental budgets. What they didn't know was that I had been meticulously recording everything since the day Ophelia had misplaced those crucial vendor verification forms, since Barnaby began subtly pushing out anyone who dared to challenge their audacious new executive expense policies. I walked through the bustling lobby, a phantom in my own company. Colleagues who, moments before, had greeted me with smiles, now found their shoes utterly fascinating. 19 years of unwavering dedication, reduced to a cardboard box and a sea of averted gazes. It wasn't until I reached my car, the familiar Vauxhall that had faithfully carried me to and from Britannia Forge for countless years, that I allowed myself a small, tight smile. They thought I was leaving with nothing. Oh, how wrong they were. I was leaving with everything they desperately wished remained hidden. I hadn't always been this wary, this suspicious. The first 15 years at Britannia Forge were, in many ways, the best of my professional life. I joined when the company was still firmly in the hands of the Northcott family, run by the venerable Jamie Northcott himself. A man of unwavering principles, Jamie would personally inspect the production line every morning, even before his first cup of Earl Grey. "Numbers don't lie, Alexander," he'd often tell me, his voice gruff but kind. "People do. Your job is to make sure our numbers tell the absolute truth." After Jamie finally retired, his son, a well-meaning but somewhat naive fellow, sold Britannia Forge to a consortium of private investors. The changes, at first, were subtle. Small corners cut, cheaper materials quietly introduced, longer intervals between equipment maintenance schedules. Nothing drastic enough to trigger immediate alarms, just a creeping sense of unease. Then came the rebranding, the aggressive new leadership, and their shiny new vision. Ophelia arrived first, a whirlwind of corporate jargon and ruthless efficiency, fresh from a multinational known for its rapacious growth strategies. Barnaby followed 6 months later, spouting platitudes about corporate culture, evolution, and synergy. I gave them the benefit of the doubt, as I always did, clinging to the hope that their methods, however unconventional, would ultimately serve Britannia Forge. But then came the first quarterly review under their new management. "These vendor payments don't match our received inventory," I'd pointed out, my finger tracing the glaring discrepancies on the spreadsheet. Ophelia had merely smiled, a predatory gleam in her eyes. "We're transitioning suppliers, Alexander. It'll balance out. You'll see." It never did. My follow-up emails, meticulously detailing the anomalies, went unanswered, vanishing into the corporate ether like whispers in the wind. Then the executive retreats began, lavish affairs held in exclusive resorts, far from the grim realities of the factory floor. And with them, the exorbitant consulting fees paid to companies I couldn't even find registration records for. Expense reports riddled with duplicated charges miraculously sailed through approval processes, no questions asked. That's when I started keeping a second set of books, the real ones. I backed everything up off-site, meticulously, not because I had a grand plan, but because Jamie's voice echoed perpetually in my mind. Numbers don't lie. Meanwhile, the very fabric of the workplace began to fray. Younger employees, inexplicably connected to Ophelia or Barnaby, received rapid promotions, leapfrogging over seasoned veterans. Long-serving staff found themselves inexplicably reassigned to dead-end departments or subtly pushed towards early retirement. Graham Finley, from purchasing, a good man with a sharp eye, once stopped by my office, his face pale with worry. "Something's not right, Alexander," he'd whispered, detailing a slew of invoice discrepancies he'd unearthed. 2 weeks later, Graham was gone, an official announcement citing vague performance issues. My daughter, Isabel, a brilliant barrister who had recently made partner at her prestigious London law firm, noticed the change in me. "You're working late every night, Dad," she'd observed, her brow furrowed with concern. What's really going on? I couldn't bring myself to tell her, to burden her with my crumbling world. She had enough on her plate. "Just busy season, love," I'd lied, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. But last month, when Barnaby, with a condescending smirk, reorganized the finance department, placing his utterly inexperienced nephew, Oscar, between me and all executive financial approvals, I knew my time was running out. That's when I acted. I made copies, secured irrefutable evidence, and meticulously constructed a timeline of every questionable transaction. Every policy change that systematically dismantled Britannia Forge's financial safeguards. Not for revenge, no, but because someone needed to remember what Jamie had taught us. Someone needed to ensure that the numbers, ultimately, told the truth. The harsh reality of my situation hit me with the force of a physical blow as I pulled into my driveway that afternoon in Chesterfield. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, I had nowhere to be tomorrow morning. No reports to review, no month-end close to meticulously prepare for. I sat in the car for a long, quiet time, just staring at my front door. My house felt different, emptier somehow, though nothing within its walls had changed. I carried the cardboard box into the kitchen and placed it gently on the counter. Then I poured myself 2 fingers of the single malt I reserved for truly special occasions. This, I suppose, qualified, though certainly not in the way I'd ever imagined my career ending. Just as the warmth of the amber liquid began to spread through me, the phone rang. It was Isabel. "Dad," Teresa from accounts just called me. "She said you were let go. What on earth happened?" I gave her the sanitized version, the corporate speak designed to deflect and obscure. Restructuring. Position eliminated. Standard corporate procedure. "That's utter bull, Dad," Isabel's lawyer instincts flared, sharp and immediate. "They can't just do that after 19 years. Without cause, we should file a lawsuit immediately." "No," I cut her off gently, but firmly. "No lawsuits, love. Not yet." I took a slow sip of my whiskey, letting the smoky warmth ground me. Trust me on this, Isabel. Some battles, some truths, aren't fought in courtrooms. After we hung up, I went to my home office, the small, quiet sanctuary where I'd spent countless evenings poring over ledgers. I powered up my computer. The USB drive, tucked securely within my briefcase, held everything. Organized by date, incident type, and monetary amount. 3 years of meticulous financial manipulation, neatly cataloged with supporting evidence. I opened a new document, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Not an angry letter, not a threat. Just a clear, concise, factual summary of everything I'd observed. Times, dates, amounts. The email addresses for the Financial Conduct Authority and the Serious Fraud Office waited in the recipient field. My finger hovered over the send button. Was I truly going to do this? These weren't mere spreadsheet errors or honest mistakes. This was deliberate financial misconduct on a grand scale. People would lose jobs, yes, but perhaps even face criminal charges. The company Jamie Northcott had so painstakingly built, the very foundation of my career, could collapse under the weight of these revelations. I closed the laptop without sending anything. Instead, my gaze fell upon a dusty photo album on a nearby shelf. I pulled it out, blowing off a thin layer of dust. Pictures of Jamie's retirement party, the old team, my late wife, Amber, standing beside me at a company picnic, both of us younger, oblivious to the silent, insidious growth within her. "What would you do, Amber?" I whispered to her photograph, her smiling face frozen in time. I already knew the answer. Amber had never tolerated dishonesty, never wavered from her moral compass. "Do what's right, Alexander," she would have said, her voice gentle but firm. "Everything else is just noise." I slept poorly that night, haunted by the ghosts of numbers and the silent judgment of a photograph. But by morning, something within me had shifted. The fog of shock and resentment had cleared, replaced by a cold, unwavering clarity. This wasn't about my job anymore. It wasn't even about me. It was about Jamie's legacy, about the unsuspecting vendors being systematically cheated, about the countless employees who would ultimately bear the brunt of executive greed. I made coffee, the rich aroma filling the quiet house. Out of 19 years of ingrained habit, I straightened my tie. Then I picked up the phone. "Edward, it's Alexander Pritchard. I need to talk to you about some financial irregularities at Britannia Forge. Yes, it's extensive. Can we meet today?" Edward Davies had been my roommate at university, a brilliant mind who now served as a senior prosecutor specializing in white-collar crime. The first move had been made. 3 days after my meeting with Edward, a certified letter arrived from Britannia Forge's legal department. The generous severance package they'd so kindly prepared demanded my signature on a confidentiality agreement. This draconian document, spanning countless pages of legalese, would effectively prevent me from discussing any aspect of the company's operations past, present, or future. The dollar amount offered was an insult, a mere 3-month salary for 19 years of unwavering service. I immediately called Isabel for legal advice. "They're worried about something, Dad," she declared after meticulously reviewing the document. "This goes way beyond standard non-disclosure terms. What happens if I don't sign?" "They're threatening to contest your unemployment benefits and withhold payment for unused vacation time," she said, her voice hardening with indignation. "Legally shaky, of course, but they're betting you won't have the resources or the stomach to fight it." I thanked her, promising to consider their offer. What I didn't tell her was that my decision was already made. Later that afternoon, my doorbell chimed. Ophelia Reese stood on my porch, a smile plastered across her face that didn't quite reach her cold, calculating eyes. "Alexander," she purred, as if we were old friends reunited. "May I come in? I wanted to personally check how you're doing." I led her into my living room, but offered no refreshments. "The severance paperwork," she announced, placing a fresh copy on my coffee table. "There was a slight misunderstanding. We can offer an additional 2 months if you sign today." "What's the rush, Ophelia?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral, deceptively calm. Her smile tightened, a fraction of an inch. "The board is finalizing next quarter's budget, Alexander. We simply need to close out all pending financial obligations, like properly paying our vendors." The words slipped out before I could stop them, a subtle probe, like the Westbrook invoices. Something flickered in her eyes, a fleeting shadow. "I'm not sure what you mean, Alexander." "The ones that showed up in the system without any corresponding inventory receipts," I clarified, my voice unwavering. "Clerical errors," she replied smoothly, her composure returning. "Already addressed." "And the consulting payments to Everite Partners," I continued, watching her closely. "The company that, strangely enough, shares an address with your brother-in-law's home office in Birmingham." The temperature in the room seemed to plummet 10 degrees. Ophelia's smile vanished completely, replaced by a glacial stare. "I'd be careful with accusations, Alexander," she warned, her voice stripped of all pretense of warmth, "especially unfounded ones that could be construed as defamatory. Did you, by any chance, remove any company documents when you left? Because that, Alexander, would constitute theft." "I kept copies of my work product, as permitted in the employee handbook," I replied truthfully, meeting her gaze squarely. She stood abruptly, the picture of barely contained fury. "I'll give you until tomorrow to reconsider the severance offer, Alexander. After that, things might become rather complicated for your retirement planning." After she left, my phone lit up with a text message from a number I didn't recognize. "Back off if you know what's good for you. We know about the USB drive." That evening, I noticed a dark car parked across from my house. It was still there the next morning. By afternoon, my bank called. Someone had attempted to access my accounts using my national insurance number, but thankfully, incorrect passwords had foiled them. When I checked my email, dozens of subscription confirmations flooded my inbox services I'd never signed up for, all demanding immediate payment. It was clear. They were sending a message. They could make my life difficult. They could destroy my credit. They could watch my house. I called Edward again. "They're pushing back," I told him. "Hard." "Expected," he replied calmly, "but concerning. It suggests there's more than just sloppy bookkeeping at play. Forward me everything. The severance offer, the text, the unauthorized access attempt. Document the surveillance." "What about my evidence?" I asked, a knot of doubt tightening in my stomach. "Is it enough?" His pause stretched, telling me everything I needed to know. "It's compelling, Alexander, but corporations like Britannia Forge have battalions of lawyers who will claim these are isolated incidents or simple accounting errors. We need more. Someone on the inside." I hung up, feeling more alone than ever. They were watching me, pressuring me, and I didn't have enough ammunition to fight back. Not yet, anyway. A week after Ophelia's chilling visit, I received a call from my old assistant, Teresa Davies. Her voice was hushed, laced with an undeniable tremor of fear. "Can we meet somewhere, Alexander?" "Not in public. Definitely not at your house. We arranged to meet at my brother's cabin, an hour outside Derby. He was in Spain for the winter, so the place would be empty, a safe haven from prying eyes." Teresa arrived, looking utterly exhausted, her gaze constantly flitting to her rear-view mirror as she pulled into the secluded driveway. "They're doing a full audit," she said without preamble once we were safely inside, the cabin's rustic silence amplifying her hushed tones. "But it's not a real audit, Alexander. They're changing records, backdating approvals, creating paper trails that never existed." "How do you know this?" I asked, a chill creeping up my spine. "They brought in consultants from Barnaby's old firm," she explained, her voice bitter. "They don't know I can access the system logs. They still have me using your old credentials." She pulled out a small USB drive, identical to mine. "I've been documenting everything, the before and after." I stared at the tiny device, a lifeline in this treacherous sea. "You're risking your job, Teresa." "They're already planning to eliminate my position next month," she said, a dry, humorless laugh escaping her lips. "Found that out when they accidentally copied me on the restructuring email." What Teresa showed me went far beyond what I'd even suspected. This wasn't just creative accounting or inflated executive perks. Britannia Forge had been systematically overcharging government contracts, falsifying certification documents for parts that didn't meet safety standards, and recording phantom inventory to inflate the company's valuation. "There's more," Teresa whispered, pulling up an email chain on her laptop. "They're preparing to sell the manufacturing division to a private equity group. The employees won't know until it's done." "The pension fund?" My voice was barely a whisper, dread coiling in my gut. Her expression confirmed my worst fears. "They've been borrowing from it for over a year. If the sale goes through, there won't be enough to cover obligations. Hundreds of families' retirement plans, built over decades, all at risk." "Who else knows about this?" "Just the executive team, and now you," she hesitated, her eyes darting around the room as if unseen ears were listening. "And someone else, I think. Tyler Shaw from Quality Control. He started asking questions last month. He disappeared a week before you did." "Fired?" "That's the thing. There's no termination paperwork. His employee file shows he resigned, but his badge was never turned in, and his desk was cleared out overnight." A cold, heavy feeling settled in my stomach. "Have you heard from him?" "No. His phone goes straight to voicemail." On the drive home, the weight of Teresa's revelations pressed down on me. We were dealing with something far darker than mere financial fraud. The surveillance car was gone from my street when I returned, but somehow that didn't reassure me. I called Tyler's number. Straight to voicemail, just as Teresa had said. I left a vague message about connecting about professional opportunities. Then I called Edward again. "We need to move faster," I told him, explaining what Teresa had shared. "This changes things," he agreed, his voice now devoid of its usual calm. "The pension fund angle elevates this significantly. I'll speak with my superiors tomorrow." "But Alexander," he paused, the silence pregnant with unspoken warning, "be careful. If they're manipulating records on this scale, they're desperate, and desperate people make dangerous choices." That night, sleep was an elusive phantom. I kept thinking about Tyler, about Jamie Northcott, who had trusted me implicitly to keep his company's finances honest, about the machine operators and warehouse staff who had put in decades of dedicated service, counting on pensions that were now being systematically drained away. At 2 a.m., my security system alerted me to movement in my backyard. By the time I reached the window, whoever it was had vanished. But my home office window was cracked open, just slightly, but enough to notice. They weren't just watching anymore. They were sending another message. Nowhere was safe. I didn't wait for them to make another move. By dawn, I was executing a plan I'd been formulating since Teresa's terrifying revelations. First, I moved all my evidence, both my meticulous documentation and Teresa's irrefutable before and after files, to 3 separate, secure locations. One set went to Isabel, with explicit instructions to open it only if something untoward happened to me. Another went into a safety deposit box at a bank where Ophelia's financial tentacles couldn't possibly reach. The third, I meticulously encrypted and sent to Edward, with a detailed key delivered separately. Next, I reached out to Graham Finley from purchasing, the man who'd been pushed out months before me. We met at a quiet diner 2 towns over, the anonymity a thin veil of protection. "I've been waiting for this call," he said grimly after I explained the situation. "I found the same discrepancies, started asking questions. Next thing I know, I'm being escorted out for violating company policy." "Did they threaten you afterwards?" I asked. "Not directly," he replied, a shadow passing over his face, "but my home was broken into a week later. Nothing valuable taken, Just my laptop and some files." He leaned forward, his eyes burning with a quiet resolve. "I filed a police report, documented everything. Never thought it would be useful, but it establishes a pattern." "A pattern," I finished for him. "Would you be willing to make a statement, Graham?" He nodded without hesitation. Been feeling like a coward for staying quiet this long. By afternoon, I'd connected with 2 more former employees with similar stories. Each held pieces of the puzzle, departments where numbers simply didn't add up, projects that vanished from tracking systems, safety concerns that were callously buried. Edward called with news. The Serious Fraud Office was officially interested, but they needed more, particularly about the pension fund manipulation. "We need current financial records," he said. "Without them, Britannia Forge's lawyers will simply claim the issues were fixed after you left." Teresa was taking an enormous risk just talking to me. Asking her to extract more documents might put her in real danger. That's when my phone rang, an unknown number. "Alexander?" The voice was barely recognizable, a strangled whisper. "Tyler? Where are you? Are you all right?" Listen carefully. His words were rushed, laced with a palpable terror. "The Bentonville contract. Check the testing certification documents against the actual test results. They're putting defective parts in military vehicles." "Tyler, where are you?" I pressed, my heart pounding. "They threatened my family." His voice broke, a raw sob. "Said they'd make sure my kids. I'm leaving town. Alexander, but someone needs to stop them before someone gets killed." The line went dead. Military contracts. Defective parts. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about lives. I called Edward immediately, relaying Tyler's chilling information. His response was immediate, devoid of any pleasantries. "This changes everything. Alexander, I'm bringing in the Ministry of Defense. Can you come to my office now?" 3 hours later, I sat in a sterile conference room with Edward and 2 stern-faced mod investigators. I laid out everything: the financial fraud, the document manipulation, the ruthless pension fund depletion, and now the military contract corruption. "We'll need your full cooperation, Mr. Pritchard," one investigator said, his voice grave. "This investigation will become very visible, very quickly. I understand your safety might be compromised. We can arrange protection." I shook my head. "I have a better idea." The next morning, I called Ophelia directly. "I've been thinking about that severance package," I said, carefully modulating my voice to sound submissive, defeated. "I'd like to discuss terms." "Wise decision, Alexander," she replied, poorly concealing her satisfaction. "Come to the office tomorrow, 9 a.m. We'll finalize everything." "Actually," I countered, "I'd prefer somewhere more neutral. The Lakeside Hotel in Windermere. They have private meeting rooms." She hesitated, a fleeting moment of suspicion, then agreed. What she didn't know was that the Lakeside was already crawling with federal agents. Rooms wired for recording, every entrance under discreet surveillance. The trap was set, and Ophelia Reese, with her cold smile and calculating eyes, was walking right into it. The Lakeside Hotel's Magnolia Room felt unnaturally quiet as Ophelia reviewed the paperwork I'd brought. Her attorney, a Weasley man in an ill-fitting suit, sat beside her, occasionally whispering in her ear. "This all looks in order, Mr. Pritchard," she finally said, her voice dripping with condescension, sliding the non-disclosure agreement across the polished table. "Just sign here, and we can put this unfortunate situation behind us." I looked at the document, 12 pages of dense legal language, meticulously designed to silence me forever. Beside it sat the severance check, a paltry 5-month salary for 19 years of my life. Before I signed, I said carefully, "I'd like to clarify something. This agreement covers all company matters, correct?" Her attorney stiffened. Ophelia's smile faltered for just a moment. "All company matters," she confirmed smoothly, her voice a practiced purr. "Standard language." I nodded, reached for the pen, then paused, my fingers brushing against the cold metal. One more question. Does this cover my obligation to report federal crimes I've witnessed? What are you implying, Mr. Pritchard? The attorney leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. I'm not implying anything, I said, slowly rising to my feet. I'm stating that I've already provided evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and criminal endangerment to federal authorities, including our conversation right now. Just then, as if on cue, the conference room door opened. Edward walked in, flanked by two stern-faced FBI agents and the mob investigators. Ophelia Reese, one agent stated, his voice ringing with authority. We have a warrant to search all Britannia Forge facilities and seize financial records related to government contracts. Her face drained of all color, a ghastly white. Edward placed a thick folder on the table. This is just a fraction of what we have, he said quietly. The rest is being presented to a grand jury as we speak. Ophelia lunged for her phone, but an agent gently intercepted her, his hand firm but professional. Barnaby Croft and the CEO are being detained for questioning simultaneously, Edward explained, along with several key board members. I didn't stay to watch them lead Ophelia away, her face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. My part was done. 6 months after the arrests at the Lakeside Hotel, I stood in the old Britannia Forge manufacturing facility, watching workers on the assembly line. The familiar machines hummed with the same rhythm they had for decades, a comforting, steady pulse. But everything else had changed. The company had been placed in receivership during the tumultuous investigation. When the dust finally settled, a coalition of dedicated employees, with crucial help from a state economic development fund, had managed to purchase the manufacturing division. They'd renamed it Britannia Legacy Manufacturing. They'd asked me to help set up the new financial systems, proper ones, built on principles of transparency and unwavering accountability ingrained into every single level of operation. All done for the day, Mr. Pritchard? Gareth, the same security guard who had once escorted me out, now nodded respectfully as I signed out at the front desk. Just about, Gareth, I replied, handing him back my visitor badge. Outside, Isabel waited in her car, a warm smile gracing her lips. How's it looking in there, Dad? She asked as I settled into the passenger seat. Good, I confirmed. They've got a solid team. They'll be fine without me checking over their shoulders. I glanced back at the revitalized building, a faint sense of peace settling over me. Jamie would be proud. We drove in comfortable silence for a while. The news had covered the story extensively. Executives arrested, charges filed, plea deals negotiated. The pension funds had been partially recovered, not everything, but enough that most retirees wouldn't lose their homes. Ophelia and Barnaby were awaiting trial, their names now synonymous with corporate malfeasance. The former CEO, in a desperate bid for leniency, had turned state's evidence. The story had faded from the headlines, replaced by newer, equally scandalous revelations. Any regrets? Isabel asked, breaking the quiet. I thought about the question carefully, turning it over in my mind. No, I finally answered, the word resonating with the quiet certainty. I didn't do it for revenge. Isabel, I did it because it was right. Everything else was just noise. That evening, I finally packed away my files on Britannia Forge. The whole sordid, complex story was meticulously documented, preserved. But I no longer needed to carry it with me, a heavy burden on my conscience. Tomorrow, I was starting a new chapter, a part-time role as a financial ethics consultant for a manufacturing association. My new mission, helping other companies set up robust systems that made it harder, much harder, for the Ophelias and Barnabys of the world to manipulate the books, to distort the truth. Not a bad final chapter for a 57-year-old accountant who simply wanted the numbers to tell their unvarnished truth.